The week Nolan Hess turned 43, his truck broke down twice, his daughter missed the school bus 3 mornings in a row, and the woman who would change everything walked into the garage bay like she owned it, because in a way, she did. He had been under a 2019 Ford F-250 when he first heard her heels on the concrete floor. Not the cautious click of someone who didn't belong. These were deliberate steps. The kind that assumed the floor had already been cleared for them. He rolled out from under the truck. She was standing 6 feet away, looking at her phone, and she did not look up. "I was told there's a Nolan here," she said. "The one who fixed the Kellner Building's emergency generator last February. That's me." She looked up then. Her name was Margaret Aldridge. He would learn that later. The full name on the company card she handed him with 2 fingers, not looking at him when she did it, already back on her phone. Margaret Aldridge, Chief Operations Officer, Aldridge Vance Industrial Group. The second name on the building that took up most of the north end of downtown. He wiped his hands on a shop rag and took the card. "We have a situation," she said. "Not here. At the facility." He waited. She finally put the phone down. "Our head of maintenance retired 2 weeks ago. We have a capital equipment audit in 11 days. The previous team left documentation that's..." She paused, choosing her word carefully. "Incomplete. Someone needs to go through it. All of it. Cross-reference the physical systems against what's on paper at Tali. That sounds like an in-house job. It would be if we had an in-house person who could do it. We don't. Not right now." She said it plainly, without embarrassment. "You were recommended by 3 separate people, including the building inspector who usually doesn't recommend anyone." Nolan set the card down on his workbench. "I have a shop to run. We know. We're not asking you to close it. We're asking for your mornings. 7 to noon, for 11 days. The rate is..." She named a number that was more than he made in a full week, per day. He picked the card back up. He had a daughter named Gracie. She was 8 years old, and she liked drawing horses, and she needed new shoes, and her school had sent home a form about an upcoming field trip that cost $45 that he had not yet signed, because he was waiting to see how the week went. He thought about all of that in the 3 seconds before he answered. "I'll need access to the full mechanical history," he said. "Not summaries, the actual logs." Margaret Aldridge was already walking back toward the door. "They'll be ready Monday." He watched her go. Then he looked at the card again. Aldridge Vance. His father used to drive past their first factory on the way to church. That was 30 years ago, when the Aldridge side of the company was still just a regional supplier. Now they had 4 facilities in 3 states and a headquarters building that had won an architecture award. Nolan had read about the award in a waiting room magazine, once while getting Gracie's ears checked. He put the card in his shirt pocket and went back under the truck. Monday was gray and cold, the way October gets in that part of the country. Not dramatic, just relentless. Nolan dropped Gracie at school, swung by the shop to leave instructions for his 1 part-time employee, and arrived at the Aldridge Vance facility at 6:58. The front desk gave him a badge, not a visitor badge, an actual access badge with his name on it, which meant someone had prepared it in advance, which meant Margaret Aldridge had been more certain he'd say yes than she let on. A man named Curtis met him in the lobby. Curtis was the facilities coordinator, mid-50s, the kind of person who had clearly once been someone's right hand and was now running out the clock until retirement. He shook Nolan's hand with genuine warmth and walked him to a room on the 2nd floor where 4 filing cabinets and 2 folding tables full of binders were waiting. "Previous guy kept everything on paper," Curtis said, with the tone of a man who had argued about this for years and lost. "Some of it's been digitized. Most of it hasn't." "When was the last full physical inspection?" Curtis made a face. "Officially, 14 months ago, and unofficially, the compressor array in Building C hasn't been touched in closer to 2 years. There's a note in the log saying it was visually inspected in March, but..." He stopped himself. "But nobody signed off on it. Nobody signed off on it." Nolan nodded slowly. He pulled the first binder off the nearest table and opened it. The previous maintenance chief had used a color-coding system that made sense internally, but had never been explained to anyone else. It was like reading a language that was almost English. "I'll need a walkthrough of the physical systems," Nolan said. "Starting with building C, I figured." Curtis was already holding his radio. "Whenever you're ready." They spent the first morning going through the compressor array. Nolan did not say much while he worked. He took measurements, cross-referenced what he found against the binder entries, made his own notes in a small spiral notebook he'd brought from the shop. Curtis stood nearby and answered questions when asked and otherwise stayed quiet, which Nolan appreciated. At 11:15 he found the first discrepancy. The binder listed a pressure relief valve on Unit 4 as replaced in August. The valve on Unit 4 was not a replacement, it was the original. He knew because the casting stamp on the housing matched the installation date on the original spec sheet, a date from 7 years ago. Someone had logged a maintenance action that had not happened. He didn't say anything yet. He just made a note. By the end of the first week, he had found 9 discrepancies. 2 were minor, mislabeled parts, clerical errors, the kind of thing that happens when paperwork is deprioritized. 4 were moderate, scheduled maintenance that had been marked complete but showed physical evidence of delay. And 3 were significant. The pressure relief valve was one of the 3. The second was a cooling system bypass in Building A that had been documented as a temporary measure following an emergency repair 18 months ago. Temporary measures have a habit of becoming permanent when nobody follows up. This one had. The bypass was still in place. The original fault that necessitated it had never been properly addressed. The third was worse. It was a load-bearing calculation error in the updated equipment layout for Building B. Not in Nolan's area, technically. That was structural, not mechanical. But the mechanical systems in that section had been reconfigured to accommodate a new piece of equipment, and whoever had done the reconfiguration had done it without accounting for a 1,200-pound variance in the static load on the northeast support column. He stared at that one for a long time. Then he went to find Curtis. Curtis was in his office eating a sandwich. He put it down when he saw Nolan's face. "How bad?" Curtis said. "The Building B issue needs an engineer's eyes before the audit. Not mine, a structural engineer." Curtis was quiet for a moment. "That's going to involve some people who aren't going to be happy about it." "I know." The reconfiguration was signed off by someone in senior management. "I figured that someone has been here for 22 years and has the ear of the board." Nolan set his notebook on Curtis's desk, opened to the relevant page. The measurements were there. The calculations were there. The variance was circled twice in red. "The audit inspector is going to find this," Nolan said. "The only question is whether they find it with a fix already in progress or without one." Curtis looked at the notebook for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. "I need to get you in front of Margaret," he said. He had seen Margaret Aldridge twice since Monday. Once in a hallway, where she had nodded at him in the way executives nod at contractors, acknowledgement without engagement. Once through a glass conference room wall, where she had been talking to 3 people in suits with the focused intensity of someone diffusing something. She did not look like she had a lot of room in her schedule for unexpected problems. She appeared in the mechanical room doorway at 4:15 that afternoon. Curtis had clearly briefed her on the walkover because she came in already knowing what she was looking at. She stood beside Nolan while he walked her through the Building B numbers, and she asked 2 questions. Both of them precise. Both of them the right questions. And then she was quiet for a moment. "When did you find this?" she asked. "This morning, and you came to Curtis immediately." "After I checked my numbers 3 times, yes." She looked at him then. Not the way she'd looked at him in the garage, with her attention mostly elsewhere. She actually looked at him. "The person who signed off on that reconfiguration," she said, "is going to say this was missed by everyone, including our previous maintenance chief, and that you're overcalculating." "I might be," Nolan said. "I'm a mechanic, not a structural engineer. That's why I said you need a structural engineer. You're sure enough about your numbers to bring it to me. I'm sure enough about my numbers that I'd be uncomfortable sitting on them. She held his gaze for another second. Then she looked back at the column. I'll have someone here tomorrow morning, she said. The structural engineer arrived at 8:30 the next day. His name was Theo Barker. Nolan almost startled at that, then caught himself. No, wait, that name was on the list. He checked his memory again. Yes, Theo Barker was on the used list. But the man introducing himself was from an outside firm, name on his badge reading, Ruben Stahl, P.E. Nolan relaxed. Ruben Stahl spent 2 hours in Building B with a laser level and a tablet and an expression that gave nothing away. At the end of it, he came to find Nolan. Your variance calculation is off by about 4%, Ruben said. Nolan waited. The actual variance is higher than you estimated. The column issue was real. It was documented by 11 o'clock. By noon, Margaret was on a call with the board. By the end of that day, Nolan understood something about this building and this company that he hadn't understood at the beginning of the week. There were people here who had been allowing problems to accumulate because solving them would mean admitting they had existed. That was not unusual. He'd seen it in every large facility he'd ever worked in. What was unusual was that someone at the top seemed genuinely uncomfortable with it. He watched Margaret through the glass conference room wall again that afternoon. This time the meeting did not look like diffusing, it looked like detonating. Friday of the second week was the last full workday before the audit. Nolan was in the documentation room at 7 a.m., pulling together the corrected binder set. He had rewritten the maintenance log cross-reference from scratch. Not because it was required, it wasn't, but because the original was unusable, and an unusable document was a liability waiting to happen. He was on page 40 of 60 when Margaret walked in. She was carrying 2 coffees. She set one on the table next to him without asking if he wanted it. He noticed she had taken it black, which was how he'd been making it in the break room all week, though he didn't know how she would know that. She sat down across the table. The board approved the emergency structural work, she said. It'll be completed before the auditors arrive. Good. The person who signed off on the reconfiguration has been placed on administrative review. He didn't respond to that. I want to ask you something, Margaret said. He kept writing. The generator in February, the one in the Kellner building. That was a Friday night. After hour, it was. You were there until 2 in the morning. The parts were difficult. The building manager told me you had your daughter with you, that she fell asleep in a chair in the lobby. He stopped writing. He looked up. He didn't tell you that to get you in trouble, Margaret said quickly. He told me because he was. She paused. He said he'd never seen someone work that carefully while also being that aware of where a sleeping child was in the room. Nolan looked back down at his notebook. He didn't answer. Her mother. Her voice had shifted. Not softer, exactly. More careful. 4 years ago, he said. Cardiac event, she was 38. There was a silence that wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when someone decides not to fill space with words that would be inadequate. I bring Gracie when I have to, he said after a moment. She knows how to be quiet. She knows what it means when I need to focus. She sounds like a remarkable kid. She is. He said it without qualification, without modesty. She is. Full stop. Margaret wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I owe you an apology, she said. He looked up again. When I came to your garage, I assumed you'd say yes because the money was good. I didn't think about what saying yes cost you. The early mornings, the schedule, she made a small gesture. I sent a car to your shop without asking. I had a badge made without asking. I treated you like a resource, not a person I was asking a favor of. He was quiet for a moment. The money was good, he said. I would be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. Still, he agreed. She stood up. The audit starts Tuesday. You don't need to be here for it, but I'd like you to be available by phone if there are questions about the documentation. I can do that. She picked up her coffee. One more thing. When this is over, and it's going to be fine, because you've done work here that most people twice your credential level wouldn't have caught. I'd like to discuss a different arrangement. Not temporary. He didn't say anything. You don't have to answer now, she said. I know I don't. She almost smiled. It was a very controlled almost smile, the kind that happened when someone was used to keeping their expressions professional, and one got through anyway. She walked to the door, then she stopped. The field trip form, she said. From your daughter's school. He stared at her. How do you? Curtis mentioned it. He noticed it in your bag on Wednesday. He's a grandfather. He notices things like that. She didn't turn around. Sign it, Nolan. She should go. She left. He sat there for a moment in the documentation room with its 4 filing cabinets and its folding tables and its 60 pages of corrected cross-references. Then he reached into his bag, pulled out the field trip form, and signed it. The audit took 3 days. Nolan was not there for most of it, but his work was. In every page of the corrected binder set, in the clear notation system he had built from scratch, in the documentation of the Building B issue that had been found, escalated, and addressed before the auditors ever arrived. He got a call on the second day from a number he didn't recognize. This is Ruben Stahl, the voice said. The engineer, I remember. The audit team asked who caught the load variance. I told them. I thought you should know, thank you. For what it's worth, Ruben said, the calculation you did. He paused. You had it within 4%, with a spiral notebook and a tape measure. Most people with a full suite of software would have missed it entirely. Nolan didn't answer right away. I had good reference materials. You had 40-year-old binders and someone else's color coding system. Ruben's voice was dry. That's not reference materials. That's archaeological work. A pause. Good luck, Mr. Hess. The call ended. He was in the shop when it came through, under a Silverado with a worn transfer case. He lay there for a moment after the call, looking up at the undercarriage in the dim light. Gracie was at school. She was going on the field trip next Thursday. She had already told him she wanted to sit next to her friend Deja on the bus, and that she needed to bring a lunch because the place they were going didn't have food, and that he should pack the kind of crackers she liked, not the other kind. He made a mental note about the crackers. Then he slid back under the Silverado and went back to work. The call from Margaret came on a Thursday afternoon 2 weeks after the audit had concluded. The audit passed, she said. No citations. The structural work was completed and documented. The auditors noted the quality of the maintenance records in their written summary. I heard, from Curtis. From Curtis, of course. There was a pause. I meant what I said about a different arrangement. I've spoken with the board about creating a part-time consulting role. Ongoing, not project-based. Your shop stays open. The hours are flexible. The scope would be larger than what you did here. He was standing at his workbench. He picked up a bolt and set it down. What happened to the person who signed off on the Building B work, he asked. He resigned, she said, voluntarily, before the review concluded, and the pressure relief valve. The one that was logged as replaced but wasn't. That was him too, or rather his sign-off. We believe the actual maintenance was subcontracted, and the invoice was, she paused. There's an ongoing financial review, so it was more than just sloppy paperwork. It appears so. He thought about the column. The 1,200 pounds of unaccounted load on the northeast support. The people who worked in Building B every day who had no idea. The consulting role, he said. Would I have authority to escalate directly? Not through a chain that has reasons to slow-walk things. There was a pause on her end. Yes, she said. That would be a condition I'd put in writing, then I'm interested. Another pause. When she spoke again, the professional tone had relaxed by a degree. I'd also like to apologize to Gracie. I've been told, again by Curtis, that she is the one who's been affected most by your early mornings this month. She understands. She's 8. She understands more than most adults I know. Curtis also says she drew him a picture of a horse and left it on his desk. Nolan closed his eyes briefly. She does that. She likes drawing horses. He has it framed, Margaret said. He showed me. He didn't respond right away. There was something about that, the image of Curtis, facilities coordinator nearing retirement, with a child's horse drawing framed on his desk, that hit somewhere he hadn't expected. Tell him she'll draw him another one if he wants, Nolan said. I'll tell him. A pause. Monday, she said. Monday, he agreed. He set his phone down on the workbench. Through the open bay door, the afternoon light was doing what it does in October, turning everything amber for about 40 minutes before it gives up entirely and lets the gray back in. He stood in it for a moment, in the smell of oil and steel and the specific cold that comes through a garage door when the season is turning. He thought about his wife, Janelle. He thought about her the way he always did, not in the shape of grief anymore, but in something quieter, the way a room feels when someone has recently left it, present in the absence. She would have laughed at all of this, not unkindly, just with the particular appreciation she had always had for situations that arranged themselves into something meaningful without announcing it. You fixed their building, she would have said, from the inside. He had. He pulled his phone back out and sent Gracie's babysitter a message about pickup time. Then he went back to the Silverado, which still needed its transfer case, and the afternoon light moved across the floor and eventually went away, and he worked until it was time to go get his daughter, the same as every day.